What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. We have to talk about this trade idea I've seen out there, not for a player, but for a head coach to help rebuild the New York Jets here. And in this case, we're looking at San Francisco 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan. And yeah, same feeling here, right? I looked at the article, I thought ridiculous, but I pulled it up, I looked at it, and it has its merits. Now, we'll get into all that, but for what it's worth, the article that I seen was from James Wudi, or Woody, excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, but Mike Florio also floated the same idea for the Chicago Bears. A lot of this is based on some of the rumored rumblings out there that the 49ers organization may be unhappy with Kyle Shanahan being able to overcome, some of those final obstacles to get the Super Bowl, to pass the AFC Championship and NFC Championship in certain cases. And after potentially missing the playoffs this year, where they currently have a 5-6 record, that could be the final nail in the coffin for them. This would allow teams that at least have this idea or look to pursue it to bypass him being potentially fired, which I think is a long shot. He's kind of in that Bill Belichick, Tom Coughlin, Mike Tomlin type situation as established guys that have won, in Shanahan's case, not technically at the highest level because he doesn't have a Super Bowl, but they've been established, they've been dominant, they've been winning, and you would assume that would be enough for them to keep it on and assume that he can get it figured out, right? But if not, here we are. And one of the things that would intrigue me about this is I don't know if this is something that would even be on the table for the New York Jets, since we've hired the 33rd team and we hired Rick Spielman as our consultant. Would they look down this particular avenue if it met the criteria that Woody Johnson and company put together about what they want in their next head coach and GM candidate? Who knows? But let's dive into some of it because there's a lot of great points made here. And then, of course, I want to know what your guys' thoughts are on this. But there's a few things that we talked about. Speaking of Woody Johnson and company, what are they looking to see, right? We heard Rick Spielman identify this during the early tenure of him being hired as the consultant and kind of what that would entail and look like. And he mentioned, obviously, it's fresh. We're just beginning. We're getting a head start on things, but we still need to hammer out, the traits. What are they looking for? What's the criteria, et cetera here. From a fan perspective, I think we can all agree. For one, we finally need to have a guy that can build a culture. We need an identity sorely, right? Rex Ryan had it. We haven't really had it a long time since then. Maybe Eric Mangini being another guy that at least had some kind of semblance of what you can expect week in and week out in terms of we're an aerial attack, we're ground and pound, we're an elite defense that we're going to force you to struggle to get to 10 points, and if we beat you 13-10, just fine. But what is the culture, right? Are we a takeaway team that feeds the ball back to the offense continuously, and we're putting up 30-40 points just because we're outpacing possessions almost 2-1 every game? Who knows? But we need that sorely. Also, we need to establish some consistency here. The only consistency we really have is that we're a poorly coached team, a team that lacks in execution, and even for the tremendous defenses that we build, even for some of the one-off offensive teams that have looked good, and I'm thinking of the Ryan Fitzpatrick-led 2015 team, for example, or the rare occasion where we put up a 30-plus point game, but then we come out and score 6 points the following weeks. All of that a pain point, right? We need to know week in and week out we have a team that's capable of putting up 24 plus points, 20 plus points, whatever it ends up being. But we're going to play dominant defense, we're going to put up 24 points, and teams just aren't going to be able to keep up with us, and they're going to be entrapped in the defense that we built that now can hone in, get after the quarterback, get takeaways, etc., etc. We haven't been able to see that in a long time. And then ultimately, in one of the key pieces here, eliminate the backseat driving. Woody Johnson, and there was some good points pointed out in the article. For example, LaFleur being fired, that looks like it was out of Robert Saleh's hands, and plenty of the other drama that followed after that. But for a long time and pretty early in Robert Saleh's tenure, it felt like he never had full control of the vehicle. Somebody's always been, treating it like a Tesla truck or something, just autonomously driving it. And he's really just the vocal piece for Woody Johnson effectively, or in these days, Aaron Rodgers leading up to his firing. You want, and we've seen this from Woody Johnson, you've actually seen it with Aaron Rodgers, for example, where he'll bend the knee, but he'll do it to somebody that he believes has undeniable credibility. Aaron Rodgers was one of those guys. You would imagine the names, kind of like I mentioned already, the Mike Tomlins of the world, the Kyle Shanahans, the Andy Reids. You would assume that if you get a guy like that, he's going to look at them and say, you have everything that we looked for walking in. I don't have any points to critique or anything I don't like as of now, right? We'll see what happens maybe if things aren't going as well early or whatever the case is. But we need that, right? The biggest question mark for everybody, and it doesn't matter if we hire Ben Johnson or whoever your top OC, DC, or former head coach is, if Woody Johnson's going to get in the way, it's going to be a disaster no matter what. But I think a name like Kyle Shanahan, not only does it draw the headlines that he's going to love, it's going to bring almost instant credibility to the New York Jets as a guy that can get this turned around. And one of the things I loved is that the comp for this, right, was Andy Reid, and more so from the fact that a change of scenery really did wonders for Andy Reid, a guy that had a ton of success with the Eagles but couldn't get over the hump, had success with the Chiefs before even bringing in Mahomes, but then that final piece really just allowed things to take off for him. I think you can imagine the same thing with Kyle Shanahan here, and it doesn't seem like that we're that far off, right? The ridiculous ways in which we've lost a ton of these games, where you're still talking about a ton of single possession games in many cases until the wheels fell off and the defense just couldn't really keep up any longer. But a ton of games where we're, having 13, 14, 15 penalties, 150 plus yards, 120 plus yards. We've given the other team 3-4 turnovers. We've failed to execute lapses in defensive alignments and adjustments on the back end. The offense that has allowed the time of possession for the other team to be almost 3/4 of the game. So there's a lot of things that can quickly get cleaned up with a guy like Kyle Shanahan here. Now, obviously, the question begs, is it likely he's even fired and whatnot? I've seen a couple different articles that I looked into it that definitely mention that there's rumblings out there. I think it's more so from the fan base than necessarily from the organization within, which largely you have to have respect for everything he's brought to the 49ers so far. But there are some things that still need to be spoken to, right? He has an immense regular season success. In my opinion, he's going into 8 years now. 4 of those he's missed the playoffs, and in all 4 of those years you can point to ridiculous injuries on a crazy scale to all of the key guys. Your Jimmy Garoppolo's, I don't know why his name is skipping me right now, but Mr. Irrelevant, George Kittle, CMC, Jordan Mason. You're talking about key guys all across their offensive line that are going down. Dre Greenlaw, Javon Kinlaw. The names go on, right? The all-pro safety, I can't remember his name, Tafunga or something like that. Talahofonoa, something along those lines. Either way, the point is, so many injuries to all of the all-pro guys that, don't forget, they've developed and built on both sides of the ball that they just can't overcome. And you wouldn't expect to, especially in their division where things get rough really, really quick. But there have been consistent failures in reaching the Super Bowl, getting past the NFC Championship in many situations. And then in my case, I'm more curious about the rotation of defensive coordinators that he's had, rolled out over the years. In some cases, just due promotions have been out there. But in other cases where they've lost those games, it feels like the defensive coordinator was scapegoated where it wasn't all their fault. You've seen the offense get a little lackadaisical. They've gotten a little overly cautious, or just the game plan didn't really make sense in terms of second half adjustments and stuff, which lost them games, which many of them, if not all of them, coming down to, final moments still. So he's just there, right? There's just something that's missing for him. But I would like to see him speak to that. Now, if he doesn't get fired, the next thing is, as I mentioned earlier, jumping on the trade, right? Can you figure out a way to pull off a Sean Payton type thing and make this happen? And for what it's worth, so you guys get an idea of the compensation, the Broncos and Saints trade, the Saints received a 2023 first round pick and a 2024 second, and then the Broncos got a 2024 third round pick. So you're not talking about absolutely ridiculous compensation. Obviously, when you're talking about a guy that's not even going to be playing in a uniform on the field, it sounds insane. But does anybody regret that Sean Payton trade right now, looking at it on paper? Rookie quarterback, a lot of overturn on the offense. Obviously, some self-inflicted stuff from a media perspective that took away from the team with Sean Payton, looking at the Nathaniel Hackett situation for one, and a couple other crazy things that I've seen out there. But ultimately, he has them primed and looking like they're going to reach the playoffs in year two, again, with the rookie quarterback. But he just knows how to tailor make things and make the most of his units, right? And he cuts his losses. He's a guy that practices, leaning out the fat pretty instantly. And it's something that I think Shanahan could pull off too. So if we were to look at this and have the exact same kind of trade pulled off here for the New York Jets, I think I would jump on it. As bad as I want us to keep our potential top 7 pick here and get us hopefully a quarterback of the future, maybe continue to shore up the offensive line, maybe get you a star wide receiver or something to help pair up with Garrett Wilson, another young guy, maybe somebody to like Mason Graham to help out Quentin Williams. It's all worth it if you can get the coaching, the guy that's going to make the most of the later picks as well, the day 3 guys that many people aren't necessarily fawning over or has that name recognition, and develop those guys up into all pros. So I'd be all for it. Again, looking at a guy that's crafted offenses that have reached the Super Bowl 3 times in the last 10 years, where Mahomes has really dominated every other instance, sign me up. Sign me up today. Now, there is one thing, and I think this would be a huge roadblock kind of going back into Woody Johnson. Kyle Shanahan, obviously close ties to Robert Saleh. He spoke on the fact that he was fired and when it went down. Specifically, he mentioned, I was pretty shocked. That stuff throws you off, especially when they're competing for first in the division this week. And I think they're up there on defense and have a pretty good team and a chance to have a hell of a year. So that was pretty surprising. So he's already kind of getting secondhand taste, if you will, of Woody Johnson and what that looks like. Again, competing for first, having a top tier defense at the time, still having the established pieces and general good health. You can't really ask for too much more, even if you are underperforming at that time. And so to see all that just get wiped away in the blink of an eye could give cause for concern to anybody. So I could see him shutting down a trade himself if the has that kind of power and pull within the organization. But ultimately, again, for you guys, let me know, what do you think? Is this overvaluing Kyle Shanahan? Would you drop everything to bring him over? Where are you leaning? What are your thoughts? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.